Pennsylvania is facing a pension crisis in which future state budgets will be severely impacted. What legislative measures do you favor in lessening the burden that all taxpayers are likely to face under the current pension system? We start with Richard this time.
The biggest of the state pension plans is PSERS by large, and so I'm going to kind of specifically refer to that. But the SERS program is pretty much the same story. These programs are certainly messed up, but we need to understand why they're messed up. They built a very large excess of revenues in the 1990s because the stock market had done better than they thought that it was going to do. And then Harrisburg essentially borrowed from these plans just to fund the state, just like the federal government did with Social Security. You all know that the federal government's borrowed from Social Security for years, and now it's time to pay it back, and that's why we're hurting at the federal level as much. Same thing is happening at the state level. So first, we need to fix this problem by passing a state law that mandates that both employee and employer must contribute into the plan, and that the plans can never be robbed or stolen, like stealing out of the cookie jar. Once we've done that, and by the way, let me actually reiterate that teachers, in the case of PSERS, have never stopped contributing to PSERS. And in fact, they've always contributed more than either I or my opponent have contributed in our own state-supported pension system. On the other hand, PSERS has problems because over the past 14 years, it was the employer, the state, that didn't contribute their share. And in fact, over the last 14 years, they contributed less than they ever have over the last 65 years. And in some years, they barely contributed at all. That's the problem. So the question then becomes, once you fix it, what kind of pension plan do we actually go to? Do we go to a defined benefit plan, or do we go to a 401k style plan? Large defined benefit plans actually get higher, better yields, which is a great thing. They get higher yields, and just a 1% higher yield actually means a whole lot when you invest over a long horizon. So that's a really big deal. Most 401k style plans are underfunded, meaning that we're going to increase the number of retired poor and retired impoverished. We can't do that. Even a well-funded 401k style plan is not as cost-effective as a defined benefit plan. An individual, and this is the big reason why, an individual must plan to plan for their own retirement, must plan to live to be 90, 95 years old, even though you only have a 10% chance of doing that, because the worst thing in life is to be 85 years old, which you've now exceeded what your life expectancy was on average, and to be broke. And so you need to plan to live to at least 90 to 95 years, which means that 90% of the people out there doing that would have saved too much money. Another 10% would actually live to be beyond 90 or 95 years, and they would find out that they indeed didn't even save enough. And so defined benefit plans get around that whole problem because you have a large plan, and now you can actually plan for the actuarial average lifespan of all of your employees, in which case you only have to plan for about 80 years old, 80 years on average. And that's what I call common sense. We need to see a lot more plans like that used because they're far more cost effective than 401k style plans. And we need to make sure everybody has a healthy pension plan, whatever it is.
Thank you. John?
What my opponent calls common sense, I call really wishful thinking. We have an economic reality. We're facing a pension shortfall right now that's reported at $40 billion, but if you use proper actuarial calculations, it's over $100 billion. Where's that going to come from? It's nice to make promises and say, oh, we get a great yield on this. Well, no, the taxpayers do not get a great yield. The taxpayers are the ones that are paying that yield. It's a person's responsibility to provide for their retirement, and defined contribution programs do that best. That's what we have, and it's not state supported. Every dollar I earn comes out of tuition revenues, not from the tax man. Richard well knows that Penn State Altoona generates $60 million a year in tuition, and we have a budget of $40 million. The difference goes somewhere else, and no taxpayer money is flowing into Altoona through the Penn State Altoona campus. Now here's what I would do first. Here's what I'm going to do first. I'm not going to take a pension because it's unconstitutional, and secondly, it's $50,000 a year added to my salary. How did you get $50,000? 3% per year of service. 3% of the $80,000 salary is $2,500. If, as Richard projects, you're going to live into your 90s, that's $2,500 extra a year. So if you live 20 years in retirement, that's $50,000 for every year of service as a state legislator. That's wrong for elected office. It's a public service that we're going to perform, not a personal enrichment program. So that's step one. Step two, we're going to go and switch all new employees, not just at the state level, but at the local levels too, into defined contribution programs. That's what the private sector has. It runs employers in the private sectors between 4.5 and 7.8%. Do you know what it's costing? The public pensions is costing employers, that is taxpayers, 18 to 20%. And that's on top of what the employees already put in. That's unbelievable. That's unsustainable. That's not going to work. We need some reality here. And going forward, if we took those two steps, a state legislator who says, no, we're going to follow the Constitution and treat public service as public service, and yes, we're going to switch to a defined contribution program because the taxpayer ought not be on the hook for all these shortfalls and these reckless behaviors of our state government. And talk about recklessness. The management of PSERS and SERS, Richard might be right to say that we've been borrowing against it, and that's wrong, and I'm all for ending that nonsense. But 1/3 of those assets are in the highest risk asset classes. They're in private equities and they're in derivatives. No wonder we're so short after what's happened. And they're assuming, back to la-la land again, that they're going to earn 7.5% every year going forward. That's not going to happen. We need to stand up for the taxpayer. Give public employees a fair pension program, the kind we have in the private sector.
Thank you. Rebuttal, Richard?
Yes, indeed, they do get 7.5%. In fact, the 25-year actual average rate of return for PSERS is not even 7.5% that they plan for. It's actually 8.6%. So when they plan for 7.5%, they're actually being fairly conservative. You talk about that because of the lower rate of return, it's not $40 billion that we're behind, but $100 billion. And that's because you're using a rate of return of 3 or 4%, which you've talked about before. But that can't really be serious. In fact, as a finance professor, I find it odd that you're saying that, because in 2000, you actually published a professional journal article in the Financial Services Review in which you conclude that the best investment vehicles are stocks and equities, not these safe bonds and T-bills. Even for someone who is approaching 5 years out, just has a 5-year investment horizon. These are people who we traditionally say should be invested in safe instruments, and you actually concluded in your professional article with your own professional advice that they should actually be completely invested in stocks and equities at the time.
I'll take you through that article in more detail when we have time, Richard, but here's the important economic point. And no good economist will tell you otherwise than what I'm going to tell you, folks. If you have promised payments that are guaranteed, and that's what we've done to our public employees, you have to invest those funds in guaranteed securities. You can't be playing the lottery with the stock market. If you're guaranteeing, and we are, as citizens of Pennsylvania, we're guaranteeing these public employees payouts 15 and 20 years hence. We've got to invest that money in guaranteed assets, and those guaranteed assets pay at most these days 2 and 3%. Now we can gamble, and that's what they've been doing at SERS and PSERS. They say heads we win. If the stock market goes up, tails the taxpayer loses. I say let's stop the gambling.
Thank you. Next question. Pennsylvania has more municipalities than every state except Illinois. Many of those municipalities are experiencing serious financial challenges, including some in Blair County. Yet one of the most logical solutions to this problem, municipal consolidation, continues to be a topic not even worthy of discussion in the state legislature. Do you view consolidation as a possible strategy? And if not, how can municipalities gain firmer financial footing? We'll begin with John.
I start with a response that Arnie McClure gave a few years ago when he was running for state senator. The government that works best for us is usually the government that's closest to us. And he answered that in the question, should we downsize the state government and make fewer senators or make fewer representatives? But it applies to our municipality situation as well. I think it's actually, there are costs to having the 2,000 plus municipalities in our state, but there are benefits too. We get more control on our own local communities. Now, with regard to the cost of those municipalities, sure, there are economies of scale. Why can't they be worked out between and among the municipalities? For example, recently we had hundreds of tax collecting agencies across the state that people and businesses had to deal with. We've streamlined that to fewer than 70 now. That's an improvement. You can consolidate Altoona and Logan Township, their police departments could work together. And they do. They coordinate nicely, in fact. And the fire departments, both the the professional full-time firefighters and the volunteer firemen, they work together as well. So we can consolidate services, but there's no necessary reason we have to throw out and give up the sovereignty that we enjoy by having these smaller local municipalities where we know our neighbors and we know our needs and we can work together in that respect.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, the reason that, that this isn't getting any traction in Harrisburg is that municipal consolidation requires a constitutional amendment. Short of a constitutional amendment to change the PA Constitution, it requires that everybody in Logan Township and everybody in the city of Altoona were to vote to do some sort of a merger, even if it only involved 1 acre of land. And so that's just not really practically going to happen. I don't think that it's the job of the General Assembly to force Altoona, Logan, or Allegheny to merge. The city and the townships need to work with each other because they cannot exist alone. So I look to the city and the townships to discuss what they can do to help each other. And whatever does happen, I want to also make sure that it's fair to everyone involved. We don't want to set up a situation in which a business on one street can move 500 feet down the street and suddenly be doing business in a completely different reality. This is not cost effective from a business perspective, and it only works to divide the community instead of uniting the community. The same thing goes for public services, such as police, fire, and schools. We can talk about consolidation of services, but it needs to be something that actually comes from the local level, and when they need some assistance to make something work out, then my door is open and I'll do whatever is needed, whatever they request that I actually do for them. As a business owner, I know how frustrating it can be to deal with multiple zoning and planning requirements in every such localized area. In addition, the permitting and inspection process is quite different in every municipality. This is just one way that having many small municipalities is inefficient, ineffective, and slows business. What business needs is a uniform set of rules that are known and established. Then businesses can get along with doing business instead of dealing with all the different types of red tape that are out there. So my job as a representative is going to be to listen to the leaders of our community from all parts of the district. And when they need changes in Harrisburg, when they've identified ways that we can do things to work better with each other, to make it better for business, to make it better for people living in the district, I'll be there to make that happen.
Thank you. Rebuttal, John?
Well, again, it's a matter of misunderstanding what competition does, and it works in the public sector as well as in the private sector. If you have multiple municipalities and they work out agreements between each other or among each other, that's fine. But whose job is it to make sure it's fair, that these things are worked out fairly? That's not what government is about. I'm standing up for a government that's from the bottom up, where people make their free associations and join together. I don't want somebody dictating otherwise. So we've always got to remember that it's competition in the private sector as well as the public sector that brings about quality, brings about a better standard of living, and brings about a better life for all of us.
Thank you. Richard?
Well, you can talk about competition, but you can also talk about multiple sets of rules. And I know that in the business environment, dealing with multiple sets of rules is an unknown and something that we just can't deal with. We need a established set of rules. They need to be the same from year to year. It can't be that, oh my gosh, one municipality just changed their rules, but all the others are still the same. Who's going to follow suit or whatever? We need a set of rules that's uniform across all municipalities. And I think that's what businesses actually want.
Thank you.